Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of How I Paint Stuff. I really need a better name than that. Now, I'm a little bit upset because I managed to record a good half of what I was doing here with the mic muted. So I wasted about 10 minutes talking to myself and getting nothing sort of down for you guys. So a little bit salty there, but it's okay. I'll very briefly run you through what I was doing. Now heads up, you can tell that I've sprayed this miniature while holding it. That is not a good thing to do. Kids, don't try this at home. You'll get devil hand. It washes off. It's nothing, don't worry about it. So, this here is one of the Stormvermin. When it focuses, there we go. This fella here is one of the Stormvermin from Games Workshop. And if you've ever played any of the Warhammer video games, or you happen to play Age of Sigmar, you'll be familiar with these guys. They are the armored core, really, of the Skaven battle line. These guys are some of the best. But when you're looking at a species that are, unregimented and slovenly, they're rats. They're rats. So, this is about as close as you get to a professional soldier in the Skaven army. But they are very cool. So I started out and I used Mechanicus Standard Grey spray from Games Workshop to get them sprayed first of all. Now there is a spray called Stormvermin Fur, which I would have used, but I don't paint enough Skaven to really warrant having that one to hand. So I gave him the grey spray first of all, and then I quickly just went over the top of him with a thin layer of Stormvermin Fur from the pot over here. The end result is much the same. Now, Stormvermin Fur is quite a pleasant colour, actually. It's a nice, sort of natural grey. This has got a little bit of a sort of a brownish tone to it. So if you're painting anything, if you're doing Lord of the Rings figures, or if you're doing RPG figures, sort of fantasy stuff, that you want to look more natural, this is a good one to go for rather than something like Dawnstone, which is another sort of mid-range grey. That little bit of brown really helps. So what I did then was to go ahead, I grabbed my dry brush, you can see this little patch of grey over here, and I got some Dawnstone, and I very quickly dry brushed all of the areas that were going to be his black fur. So you see on the back of the arm here, and in his little bit, his leg here, these bits are done very, very quickly with the dry brush, and then I just blasted some Nuln Oil, that's a shade, over the top of that. Now what I'm going to do is once I finish painting the rest of the details on this model, I'm actually going to blast the whole thing in Agrax Earthshade, including these parts I've already washed. Because you can layer washes, and sometimes it works really, really well. So what I've got to do next, though, is the next largest area of colour. And that's definitely going to be his cloak. So you see there's this cloak here, and on the back of his, I want to say his butt. Okay, the rat butt cloak I'm also going to paint. There's a little bit of it around the front here, and if I get him up close, you can see behind the sort of chainmail tabardy thing as well, there's a little bit there to do. So I'm going to do that. Now I am going to paint it red. You can of course paint it themed to your army if you've got a different color scheme you want to use. There is nothing saying you can't paint it exactly how you want. Personally, I like the look of them, how they are, their official color scheme. So that's what we're going to do today. And see, nothing to it. Just going to quickly dab on. Now, there might be one or two spots where I get a little where his armor's going to be. The only thing I really want to be careful about during this stage is not getting it on his fur. That's the only thing I want to miss. If I get it on where his armor is going to be, it doesn't really matter because we're going to paint his armor anyway. But the arms, I definitely would like to stay the shade that I've spent the time on making them. So, there we go. We'll just move around there. I'm going to quickly finish this off, and then we'll come back to that and I'll show you what I've done. Okay, now that didn't take me long at all. And as it turned out, I didn't really need to swap out the brushes. I was quite lucky. Managed to get all of that red done very, very quickly. Now I have gone over, like on the back of his thing here, you can see I've actually painted a little bit of what should be a collar But that's not too much of a problem because we're going to fix that when we come to painting the arm. Now, corn red goes very, very smoothly over a mid-tone grey like Mechanicus Standard Grey and Stormvermin Fur, so it's a brilliant one to use. I really like corn red. It's going to give us a slightly darker tone than I think the official Skaven use, but I like it. Now, speaking on the subject of painting the way I like, here's where we're going to get into a couple of choices. And that is either rat skin flesh or Bugman's Glow. Now, Bugman's Glow it's a base coat for human skin. You know, you'll find that most tutorials will point to Bugman's Glow for especially Acadians and stuff like that. I like it, and you can paint Skaven with it, but I like the slightly more orange tone that rat skin flesh has. I mean, it looks way different in the pots, but once you actually get it on the model, they don't look massively different, but they do look different. So under an Agrax Earthshade, I'm going to go ahead and use rat skin flesh. Now, I could paint the armor now, but I'm instead going to swap in for the skin, because there are a couple of areas where if I paint the skin now, I'll be able to tidy up by using the armor color. Whereas if I paint the armor now, I will instead have to very carefully paint those toes in. Okay, now areas like in the back of behind his shield here, I'm going to very quickly jab that in there. Now you might see there's a little bit of that grey still showing through, but that's okay. We can come back and do another thin coat over the top of this. So I'm just going to block in all of these flesh areas. Now, you see this is not too difficult. All I'm going to do is quickly finish this off, and I'll come back to you. Now, all of his skin is finished. I've base coated it all with rat skin flesh. You can see I've gotten in the back of his ears here. And as an important note, don't forget, Skaven have tails. Now, you may laugh as well, but the number of times I have forgotten to paint a tail, it's a real pain. Now, what I'm going to do, there is one last step I'm going to go through before I go ahead and I start putting on the metallic colors for the armor, and that is any wood or brown details. Now, this is because if I bring the shield up here and we get a real close look at that, if we look across the top, you see there's these little metal details. Same to like on the halberd here, for example. I want to try and get those out of the way, because if I do the wood now and I splash onto those bits, they're little bits to clean up later. Versus if I paint them in painstakingly now and I put the wood on, the wood's a larger area. I'm more likely to make a mess, and then I've got to tidy up. So you're always looking for ways to try and minimize the amount of time you got to spend on brush strokes. You know, get the most out of what you're doing. Try and plan up. So now with the wood painted in, he's really starting to come together. You know, he's starting to look much more like a real Skaven. Now, I also very quickly painted his belt in the same color. Once the miniature's had its wash, you know, it's not going to matter. So we're now going to get started on this armor. Now, between the two of them, I have here Lead Belcher. I had here Lead Belcher. I have here Lead Belcher and Balthazar Gold. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do all of the armor and the metal in Lead Belcher, and then I'm going to pick out just a few details in Balthazar Gold, because I like the really brassy look that some of these details have on the Skaven. Particularly with the Stormvermin, they tend to have, you know, richer, nicer looking armor. Now, I know that bronze and all that sort of stuff isn't the tougher armor that's out there, but it looks cool. So we're going to follow rule of cool. So it's a little bit wet, and I have already mixed in some thinner medium into my own paints. So the consistency will look the same. Anyhow, let's get started. Just putting on Lead Belcher. Anywhere that there's metal. I'm going to do everything that's metal in this, okay? So I'm going to go around. I'll actually just do that off screen. Okay, this is not particularly exciting. There's not really a great deal to tell you about it either. This is just going around and making sure all the metal is base coated with Lead Belcher. Okay, so I'm going to do that now. Now that all that metallic is done, it's time to get started on the brass. Now, there is a lot of metal on this guy here, and what you paint brass is entirely down to you. Because he's got this little chainmail tabard thing down on his legs here, I'm going to paint these ones in brass, I think. I think the, I don't know what those are called. Those aren't greaves, are they? Doesn't matter. His leggy armor. His leggy armor I'm going to do brass. And I'll probably do his helmet the same as well, just so it gives him that even sort of look to it. Same procedure as always. A little bit of water in our paint, just to make it smooth on the brush. And then we're going to get this in here and just paint over the top of that silver. Now, Balthasar Gold is a base paint, but I tend to find it goes on much, much easier over a lead belcher first. You put down a silver covers better. You get a much richer bronzy sort of colour over the top of it. Now that we've finished the brass details, you can see I've done his helmet and there's little bits on his legs here, along with just the bottom of his shield. Almost everything else is finished. I did quickly touch in his nose, his teeth and claws, just to finish off those little details. And with that, all of his base coats are finished. Now, just like that, he is finished. Like, everything is painted, but he's not particularly inspiring. It's all very flat, and the tone is he's a little bit 90s cartoon. But what we're going to do next, we'll fix that. With Agrak's Earthshade. They ought to be paying me for how much I put into this. So, here we have our pot of magic. Here we have our large brush. Now, yesterday with the Cadian officer, I used a much smaller brush. I was very careful. I am going to demonstrate today the awesome power of not really giving a shit, because everything here is going to be doused in this stuff. So, in it goes. I'm going to be quite liberal with it, and I'm going to chuck it everywhere. So, same as yesterday, I want to make sure that I don't miss anything. And I do want to make sure that if there's any areas I have missed, I go back over, give them a good splattering. With the Skaven, you can be much more liberal with this stuff. And if it does pull up anywhere, it's not nearly as much of an issue as it would be on like a more regimented sort of, I guess, real-looking figure. With the Skaven, you can afford for it to look a little bit bonk. Oopsie daisy. You don't want it to pull so that it's all in one place, though. That will still look ugly. But if you end up with too much of it in a certain area, you can just quickly shove it around with the brush rather than trying to take it off. So, make sure we don't miss his tail. His little ratty tail. Goodness me. You can see just how quickly this makes the cloak, the fur, the armor, how everything starts to come together. And he looks competent. Suddenly, instead of looking like that 80s cartoon, he's got a bit of oomph to him. He's got a little bit of scrap in him, a little bit of dirt. He looks like he's given somebody the business. So I will just triple check that I haven't missed any part of his sword. You see where it's collecting around his little tabard, chainmail tabard thing here. I can just quickly draw that away with the brush. Same on the side of his thing here, his shield. Make sure there's plenty on his face, because I really want that to go dark. You'll see why shortly. But I think, for the most part, that is that step done. And you can see, just how quickly it makes a massive difference to the look of this miniature. So, I'm now going to put him somewhere he can dry. We'll give that about half an hour. And then we'll come back and we'll see how he looks, if we're going to do anything else to him. Now, to the magic of television, we can see how much of a difference that shade has made. He's really dark, really grungy, and all those recesses have been nicely shaded in for us. Really, really simple. The metallics in particular look a lot better once they've had that on. You might see a couple of the recesses are not totally dry yet, but that's really much of a much. What I'm going to do now is to highlight just a couple of details to really make them pop. And those are going to be simple as. What I'm going to use is Cadian Flesh Tone to do the skin, because that'll be the business. That'll make it look that much better. And I'm going to use a red tone. Probably going to use Basecoating Red for his cloak. And the reason being is this is not such a sharp and very bright red tone like some of them you'll get. So we'll see what we get. I'll show you how to highlight something like a cloak. Because particularly in the case of the Skaven here, you don't want to spend forever highlighting every single crease, because there are a lot of them and there are a lot of Skaven to paint. You will get the hang of how much paint you ought to have at any given time. So here we have, just along the edge there, and again, every time I'm concentrating, I end up whispering. So you don't want to, oh dear, you don't want to go too much into this. But if you get just a few of those edges, there we go. Once that's dried, because it looks very, very pink while it's wet. But a lot of these layer paints, once they dry, they'll make a big difference. They will look closer to the tone of what's underneath them. So I'm just going to draw quick lines along the top of any of the creases. Just a few flicky bits. Make these look a little bit ragged around the bottom here. And if there's a hole, I'll highlight one edge of it and leave the other in shadow. And these, you're normally going to see Skaven in units of 20 or so. So these don't have to be, by a long shot, these guys don't have to be perfect. You know, your highlights can be quite blocky, and it won't really matter. So there we have his cloak finished, and you can see that's very, very quickly done. That was not a lot of effort, just a matter of 30-40 seconds with a little bit of Basecoating Red and some water. Job's a good one. I'll do the same with his skin. I'll highlight this with Cadian Flesh Tone along the back of his knuckles. I'll just quickly dab these in. You don't want to blip, 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 blip. You don't need to worry too much about this stuff being perfect. Do his lips there, under his eyes, because he's got quite bulgy little eyes there, so we'll get under the eye sockets, do the other side of the lip. He's got that ratty sneer going on. Top of his ears, fingers on this side, blip, 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 blip. And, you know, I'm not going to muck about with any more. The last thing I'm going to do, I probably wouldn't do this on any of the others, if I'm honest. But for the sake of showing you how easy it can be to really make these last couple of steps pop, I'm going to highlight that brass. And how I'm going to do that is with Liberator Gold. Liberator Gold is kind of a silvery gold tone to it, which works really well. Let's get them up as close as I can here. Here we go. This works really well on these brassy tones. See? Easy as that. So I'm just going to go quickly around. I'm going to do that to the rest of his brass stuff. This guy's definitely going in the front rank from now on. When you're highlighting Skaven metal as well, you don't have to be precise. You can be quite rough with it. Give it kind of a natural, more beaten appearance if you miss or you go over a couple of places where you wouldn't have planned to highlight normally. You know, makes it look dented. So I'll do that quickly on here as well, just along the bottoms of these plates. You know, real quick. I'm not even going to do the whole line, just splat, splat, splat. And that is the rat done. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to let him dry so that he's all properly finished off. I will do a base for him, and I mean, I'm not even going to do anything else other than what I've shown you. So the base is going to go on, and that is literally all I'll have done. So you've seen all those steps now, and that is a finished Stormvermin. So, if you've got any other questions, you want to see some specific techniques, or maybe there's a miniature you'd like to see me paint, any questions you'd like, just go ahead, pop them in the comments, I'll get in touch. Thanks very much for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.